Hey everyone, you joined me for a lap analysis of my favorite track in the world, Spa-Francorchamps in Belgium. During the practice session that you're seeing, I was running a high downforce setup, which wasn't ultimately the fastest way to go around Spa, but it helped me manage a really old set of tires that I was running on at this time. Spa is a very unique track for open wheel cars. Our cars rely heavily on downforce for grip around corners, and that's why we can corner at 4 or 5 times the amount of a normal car in high-speed corners. So because of the nature of Spa having long straights and lots of medium and high-speed corners, the teams have to decide how much compromise on downforce versus straight line is worth the most lap time. For our Dallara F3 car, we have 3 levels of downforce options: low downforce, medium downforce, and high downforce. Most tracks are pretty clear cut, like Monza's definitely low downforce unless it's wet, and then you have Hungaroring in Budapest, which is 100% high downforce all the time. The case for Spa's downforce level, however, is not so clear. So you have Sector 1 and 3, which have 3 or 4 kilometers worth of straights, but then you have Sector 2, which is a bunch of medium and high speed corners where downforce really makes the difference. So what is the optimal for Spa? Well, the answer really varies from car to car. For instance, in 2018, we had a slightly different engine with a higher center of gravity, and the conditions were a bit different than 2019, so medium downforce was the right way to go. But in 2019, LDF was actually faster. So the other thing to take into account for qualifying is the draft. So by being in the slipstream of a car in front of you, you're able to reduce the drag significantly of the wings. So that means you can run a higher downforce setup and actually get the same amount of straight line speed as if you were by yourself on a low downforce setup, at the expense of some cornering grip if you're too close to the car in front. Okay, so let's do a run through of all the corners of Spa. Turn 1 is the only proper corner, let's say, in Sector 1. So it's important to get right because it leads onto an absolutely massive straight. So this is the famous Eau Rouge Raidillon complex. In an F3 car and in pretty much all open wheel cars, you keep it flat out and you just try and reduce the scrub of the front tires. Even just the slightest overslipping of the front tires can actually result in a few kilometers per hour loss all the way down the Kemmel Straight. It's difficult to see in this video, but the straight actually has a really strong uphill gradient, so the approach of Raidillon is actually really important, even though it's flat out. Time for Sector 2, probably my favorite sequences of corners in the entire world. So now we're heading into turns 7, 8, and 9, which is actually known as Le Combe. This is one of those places where you often see a really big difference in techniques from driver to driver, from team to team. To be successful at Le Combe, you need to have a compromise between the 3 corners. So the goal to be quick there is to find the right ratio of compromise between each one. Typically though, you want to have the last right-hander flat out, or just barely flat out. And this ratio really changes throughout a weekend, so you really have to be on your toes here. Having maximized exit speed from Le Combe, we are now entering the big downhill braking zone of Brussels Corner. This is a long downhill right-hander, and downhill corners are inherently understeery, so we have to be really careful not to over-scrub the front tires too much trying to carry speed. The most time to be gained here is purely on braking late, while still managing to stop the car enough to keep a short radius around the corner. The inside actually has developed a grip strip over the years because so many cars end up hugging that inside line. So this is called No Name Corner, and it's really important to get a good exit here given the long straight afterwards. It's also a downhill corner, so just like Brussels, it's typically understeery mid-corner. It's still a fast corner, so the downforce definitely makes a difference here. So I usually try and keep the differential locked by having a little bit of maintenance throttle in mid-corner, and then I use a little bit of brake on entry to rotate the car. So Pouin is possibly my favorite corner in the entire world. It's a super high speed, blind, double left-hander which can be done flat in an F3 car in medium downforce, if the conditions are perfect. So I did end up doing it flat in qualifying in 2018, so in the car you're actually seeing, but in 2019 it just wasn't possible on the downforce settings. We also had an engine that was a bit more powerful, so we weren't able to keep it flat given the higher entry speed. One of the special things about this corner is because you can't see the exit when you turn into the corner, you really have to be very predictive and proactive when you first decide to turn into the corner. So the next high-speed chicane is known as campus corners. They're fourth gears with strong crowning in the road between the two corners. So this means that there's an incredible amount of grip in the banking on the full inside of the corners, but if you're just a little bit offline, you'll end up running wide and probably go off. There's a hump in the middle of the corners that actually causes a snap of oversteer if the car isn't made straight temporarily. This one is super satisfying when you get it right. STAVELOT is probably the single most important corner on the entire track. There are about 2 kilometers of straights right after this corner, and the next corner is easily flat, so it's really important that you get a good exit out of this corner. While braking late as possible is of course important, because there's so much banking actually on the inside of this corner, you're able to carry a lot of speed, so the late braking emphasis isn't as strong as perhaps some other corners. Turn 16 is easy flat for us, but it becomes very important in the wet, because if it's really wet, you probably won't be able to do it flat, and then it becomes the important corner that leads onto the long straight. So now we're approaching the final chicane. In the race, there are some great overtakes here. You're coming from a really long straight with probably a big slipstream, and then you have a very hard brake zone. This sequence of corners is unlike most slow speed corners, where usually the emphasis on braking late and getting a good exit. While that's still important here, it's actually just as important to keep the speed up in between the corners because of how slow it is. The difference between being flat and 80% throttle and pull-on could be worth maybe a tenth or two, but just 1 mile per hour too slow here could actually be a 3 or 4 tenths loss. So this one's really important. And with that, we have a lap of Spa. I really hope you guys enjoyed that. It's my favorite track in the world, and if you ever have the chance to go as either a spectator or a driver, 100% do it. You won't regret it. It's just one of the most magical places in the world. Anyway, see you guys in the next one.